My supervisor had always been precise, distant, and impossibly controlled. In the 3 years I worked under him, he had never raised his voice, never showed emotion, and never once summoned me without an assistant scheduling it days in advance. That's why when he personally called me into his office that Tuesday morning, my first instinct wasn't fear, it was confusion. That changed the moment he locked the door. He didn't sit behind his desk. He didn't offer me a chair. Instead, he crossed the room in 3 sharp steps and pressed a thick, sealed envelope into my hands like it was burning his skin. His face was pale, his jaw clenched so tightly I could see the muscle twitch. "Listen to me very carefully," he whispered, leaning in close enough that I could smell the coffee on his breath. "Do not open this here. Leave immediately. Go home, pack 1 bag. Take your child. You have less than 24 hours. Then he stepped back, turned away, and stared out the window as if he physically couldn't look at me anymore. I stood there frozen, my fingers tightening around the envelope. My mind raced through possibilities, some kind of loyalty test, a mistake, a joke taken too far. But his hands were shaking. His voice had cracked. This wasn't a test. Something had already gone terribly wrong. Before I tell you what was inside that envelope, make sure you subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from, because what happened next forced me to question every single person I thought I could trust. My name is Elena Morales. I'm 30 years old, a single mother, and until that day, I lived a quiet, exhausting life in a modest apartment on the west side of Los Angeles with my daughter, Lucia. Lucia is 8, curious, gentle, endlessly creative. She draws constantly, usually pictures of the 2 of us holding hands under giant suns or crooked rainbows. She is my entire universe. Her father left before she could even form memories of him. He said responsibility scared him more than loneliness. Since then, I worked double shifts, freelance jobs, weekends, anything to keep food on the table and stability in her life. Things finally began to turn around when I secured a full-time role as a senior operations assistant at Caldwell Private Equity, a powerful financial firm with offices overlooking downtown Los Angeles. The hours were brutal, the culture was cold, and my boss, Marcus Hale, was known for being ruthless and emotionally unreachable. But the salary meant good schools, safety, a future. That morning began like any other. I woke before sunrise, packed Lucia's lunch, braided her hair, and slipped a note into her backpack that read, "You are brave, you are loved." She asked if we could go to the beach this weekend. I promised her we would. By lunchtime, that promise felt like it belonged to another lifetime. The subway ride downtown was packed. Everyone looked half asleep, glued to their phones, unaware that my world was already starting to fracture. I remember staring out the window at the skyline, thinking maybe the hard part of my life is finally over. That thought didn't survive the morning. When I arrived at the office, the energy was wrong. No laughter, no chatter. Conversations stopped when I passed. 2 unfamiliar men in tailored suits stood near the executive elevators, silently observing everyone who walked by. At exactly 9:18 a.m., my desk phone rang. "Elena?" my manager's assistant said, her voice tight. "Mr. Hale needs to see you, now." The line disconnected before I could respond. I told myself it was about compliance paperwork, or a delayed report, anything ordinary. It wasn't. Marcus Hale stood near the window with his back to me when I entered. He didn't greet me, he didn't sit. When he finally turned around, I barely recognized him. The fear in his eyes was unmistakable. "Lock a door," he said. He removed a sealed envelope from his desk drawer and slid it toward me. My name was written across the front in thick black ink. "You need to do exactly what's written inside. No deviations, no delays." That's when I knew this had nothing to do with my job. I left the building barely aware of my surroundings, the envelope tucked inside my jacket like a weapon or a lifeline, I couldn't tell which. My heart pounded as I made my way home, scanning faces, memorizing exits. Once inside my apartment, I locked the door, checked it twice, then stood alone in the living room. My hands shook as I tore open the envelope. Inside were 4 items: a one-way airline ticket to Bozeman, Montana, departing at 8:10 p.m. that evening, a prepaid phone with a single contact labeled "Only call this number," a folded photograph, and a handwritten note. The photo nearly made me collapse. It was Lucia, standing outside her school that very morning, her backpack slung over one shoulder. I was at work when it was taken. Someone had been watching her. The note read, "You accessed something you weren't meant to see. If you remain in Los Angeles past midnight, you and your child will be eliminated. Follow instructions exactly. Do not involve anyone. You are being monitored." My lungs forgot how to breathe. What had I seen? Then it hit me. 2 days earlier, I'd flagged a financial anomaly, an inactive account suddenly receiving a massive foreign transfer. I questioned it. I was told to approve it and move on. I went to Lucia's school immediately. Seeing her safe nearly broke me. I signed her out early and told her we were going on a surprise trip. She smiled and asked if there would be snacks. I promised her we would. By lunchtime, that promise felt like it belonged to another lifetime. The drive home, I noticed a dark sedan behind us. Every turn I took, it followed. That's when my fear turned into certainty. We were being hunted. I packed quickly. Documents, clothes, cash. The prepaid phone vibrated once. "Do not call until you reach the airport." Then my personal phone rang. Unknown number. A calm woman's voice spoke. "They are outside your building. Exit through the rear stairwell. 1 bag each. Do not draw attention. Do not look back." The call ended. Minutes later, we were gone. At the airport, the prepaid phone rang. "Leave immediately. Get into the gray SUV by the curb. Say nothing." I didn't trust him, but I trusted fear less. The man introduced himself as Ethan Cole, a former federal investigator. He explained everything as we drove into the mountains. My boss hadn't been a financier. He'd been undercover. The account I flagged belonged to Governor Nathaniel Cross, a man with national influence and a spotless public image. Behind the scenes, he'd been laundering billions through shell firms to fund global criminal operations. By noticing that transfer, I'd become a liability, a disposable one. We arrived at a secluded lodge hidden deep in the wilderness. That's where I learned the truth, and that's where the gunfire started. They found us that night. The attack was brutal, coordinated, professional. Ethan covered our escape as Lucia and I hid in a reinforced bunker beneath the lodge. When the emergency phone rang, I nearly dropped it. The voice on the other end was my boss, alive. "You were never chosen by accident. You were chosen because you asked questions." He gave me a choice: disappear forever or expose everything. I looked at my daughter, terrified but trusting, and I made my decision. We released the files. Every name, every transfer, every crime. By morning, arrests were happening worldwide. The governor was detained while trying to flee. The network collapsed. The world changed. Today, Lucia and I live quietly under protection. She sleeps peacefully. She laughs again. And sometimes she asks, "Mom, are the bad people gone?" I tell her yes, not because all of them disappeared, but because someone finally stood up. My name is Elena Morales. I wasn't brave. I was a mother. And that was enough. The man outside the panic room didn't raise his voice. That terrified me more than the gunfire. "Elena Morales," he said again, calm and precise. "We are not here to hurt you or your daughter. We are here to retrieve classified property that does not belong to you." Classified. Not illegal. Not stolen. Classified. That single word confirmed everything I feared. This wasn't about criminals scrambling to escape justice. This was about the government erasing a mistake. Lucia clung to my leg, shaking. I dropped to my knees and wrapped my arms around her, whispering that everything would be okay, even as my own body felt like it was breaking apart from the inside. Ethan stood near the wall, his weapon lowered. Too lowered. "Ethan," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "You said this place was secure." He finally looked at me, and in his eyes I didn't see guilt. I saw resignation. "I didn't lie," he said quietly. "I just didn't tell you the whole truth." The door shook as something heavy struck it. "Final warning," the voice outside called. "Hand over the drive." My heart pounded so hard it hurt. I turned fully toward Ethan. "How long?" I asked. "How long have you known about continuity?" His jaw tightened. "Since before you ever flagged that account," he admitted. The words felt like a knife. "So you used me," I said. "You put my daughter in danger." "I didn't choose you," he snapped, the first crack in his control. "You were already in the system. The moment you questioned that transfer, they tagged you. I was sent to manage fallout." Manage fallout. That's what my life had become. The panic room door buckled inward. Lucia cried out. I made my decision. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the small black USB drive, the one copy I hadn't told anyone about, the one I duplicated while Ethan slept, driven by nothing but instinct and fear. I held it up. "You want this?" I shouted toward the door. "Then listen carefully." The room went silent. "This data is already scheduled for release, not to the media, not to law enforcement, to encrypted civilian networks across 12 countries. If anything happens to my daughter, everything goes public. Every name, every operation, every secret." That part was a lie, but they didn't know that. The voice outside paused. Then, "You're bluffing." I met Ethan's eyes. "No," I said. "I'm desperate." That was the truth. The door stopped shaking. Seconds stretched into eternity. Finally, the man spoke again. "Open the door." Ethan moved toward the control panel. "Don't!" I shouted sharply. He hesitated, and that hesitation told me something else. He wasn't sure who would win. I slammed my hand onto the emergency override. The lights cut out. The room filled with the sound of compressed air as the floor panel beneath us released. Before anyone could react, the trap mechanism triggered. Lucia and I dropped. Not far, just enough to knock the breath from my lungs. A secondary tunnel, one Ethan had never mentioned, one Rowan must have built. We ran, through darkness, through cold stone, through fear so sharp it burned. Behind us, shouts erupted. Gunfire echoed. We didn't stop. The tunnel opened into the forest 1/2 mile from the house. Snow bit into my feet as I ran, Lucia in my arms, branches tearing at my skin. A vehicle waited at the tree line, engine running, headlights off. The driver's door opened. A woman stepped out. Late 50s, gray hair pulled tight, eyes sharp enough to cut glass. "Elena Morales," she said. "I was wondering when you'd stop trusting men who explain things after it's too late." "Who are you?" I demanded. She smirked. "Someone who helped build continuity, and someone who's been trying to burn it down ever since." She looked at Lucia, then back at me. "You have something they'll kill for, and I have a place they can't touch. But if you get in this car, there's no more protection, no more immunity." I didn't hesitate. I buckled Lucia in. As the car sped away, I looked back once, just once, at the distant glow of lights in the forest, at the system collapsing in on itself, at the lie I once believed, that truth alone was enough. It wasn't. Truth needed teeth. And now I had them. I believed the danger had passed. That was my first mistake. For 6 weeks after the data release, Lucia and I lived in what the government called secure transition housing. It sounded official, reassuring, the kind of phrase meant to calm people like me,
ordinary citizens who had stumbled into extraordinary danger. In reality, it was a quiet house tucked into a mountain town so small it didn't even show up on most maps. No neighbors, no nearby stores, just trees, silence, and the constant presence of men and women who never smiled and never explained more than necessary. They told me the network was dismantled. They told me the arrests were ongoing. They told me Governor Cross would never see daylight again. They told me we were safe. Lucia tried to adjust. She did her schoolwork online, drew pictures by the window, asked fewer questions than a child her age should have to. At night, she slept curled against my side, her small hand clutching my shirt like I might disappear if she let go. Every sound still made me flinch. Every passing car still made my heart race. Ethan visited once a week. He brought updates, groceries, sometimes a tired smile. But something in him had changed since the night of the lodge attack. He was sharper, more guarded, like a man who knew the fight wasn't finished but wasn't allowed to say it out loud. Then, one morning, everything unraveled. It started with a notification on the secure tablet they had issued me. Internal alert, restricted access. That alone was strange. I wasn't supposed to receive internal alerts. I wasn't supposed to receive anything. The message was brief. Do not trust the conclusion. There is a second ledger. My hands went cold. I stared at the screen, rereading the sentence over and over. Second ledger? That made no sense. We had released everything. Every file Rowan had compiled, every transaction trail Ethan had shown me. Unless what we exposed was only part of it. I didn't tell anyone. Not Ethan, not the security team. Instinct told me this message wasn't meant to exist, that someone had risked their life to send it. That night, after Lucia fell asleep, I powered up the satellite laptop hidden beneath the floorboard, equipment I had been told would never be needed again. The moment I connected, the screen flickered. Then a familiar encryption prompt appeared. My breath caught. It was Rowan's. The same custom encryption he'd used before, the one he said would only activate if the first release failed to destroy the entire system. My fingers hovered over the keys. If I was wrong, I would trigger alarms. If I was right, I would reopen a war I barely survived. I typed the code. The screen filled with folders. Not financial transactions, not shell companies. Names, judges, military contractors, media executives, federal agents. People who had never touched dirty money directly, but who had protected those who did. This wasn't corruption. This was control. And at the center of it was one word stamped across every file. Continuity. My chest tightened. Governor Cross hadn't been the head of the snake. He'd been the face. A decoy powerful enough to satisfy public outrage while the real structure remained untouched, quiet, embedded, patient. Lucia stirred in her sleep, murmuring my name. I closed the laptop and held her until her breathing steadied, knowing with absolute certainty that what I'd just seen put us back in danger. The next morning, Ethan arrived early. Too early. He looked tired, but more than that, he looked tense. His eyes scanned the tree line before he even stepped inside. "We're moving you," he said without preamble. "Why?" I asked. He hesitated. That was all the answer I needed. "Ethan," I said quietly, "how many people knew about this location?" His jaw tightened. "Too many," he admitted. Before I could respond, the power went out. Not flickered. Out. Lucia screamed. Then the windows shattered. Smoke filled the room as alarms blared. Ethan grabbed Lucia, shoving her toward the panic room when gunfire erupted outside. "They're not supposed to know," he muttered, more to himself than to me. I pulled the laptop from its hiding place and followed them, heart pounding. Inside the reinforced room, We waited. Minutes passed. Then footsteps. Voices. Calm. Controlled. Not mercenaries. Not criminals. Professionals. Someone spoke through the door. "Elena Morales," a man said evenly, "we don't want your child. We want what you accessed last night." My blood turned to ice. They knew. That meant one thing. Someone on the inside had watched me. Someone I trusted. I looked at Ethan. He didn't meet my eyes. That silence told me everything. And in that moment, I understood the most dangerous truth of all. The people hunting us weren't outside the system. They were the system. And I was still holding the one thing they couldn't afford to let exist.